Romeo and Juliet Act 1, Scene 5. In this scene, the fiery Tybalt simply overhears Romeo's voice at the Capulet family party, and impulsively he reaches for his weapon. Tybalt speaks. This by his voice should be a Montague. Fetch me my rapier, boy. And now by the stock and honor of my kin, to strike him dead, I hold it not a sin. Tybalt is a character we will encounter frequently in Shakespeare's plays. For example, there is Hotspur from Shakespeare's play Henry IV. And of him Shakespeare writes, he kills 6 or 7 dozen Scotsmen before breakfast, washes his hands, and then says to his wife, "To hell with this boring life." And the list of characters could go on and on. They are all men who'd rather split your head open than gracefully or diplomatically bow down or accommodate in any way. And as Shakespeare describes in this scene, they are like beasts, like my neighbor's dog, that when forced to keep quiet, tremble. Tybalt speaks, "Patience perforce with willful choler meeting makes my flesh tremble in their different greeting." One Shakespearean scholar writes of Tybalt and other such violent characters from Shakespeare's plays that they are like dinosaurs, heroic beasts unfit for the smaller world of accommodation and grace. They are all representative of the old way of being, the medieval way of thinking, which was by the time of Shakespeare coming to an end. And here Capulet represents the modern period, which was just beginning. One great transition of Shakespeare's time was with the empowerment and voice of woman with Queen Elizabeth, who rejected the Pope's authority and reestablished the Church of England. She was characterized as being intelligent and independent. So we see in Shakespeare's life and in Shakespeare's works the transition from the medieval to the modern world. In Shakespeare's play Hamlet, the transition is very prominent, with old Hamlet or Father Hamlet having a medieval ardor, and with young Hamlet having a modern ardor about him. The division that we see in this scene between Tybalt and Capulet goes back as far as the beginning of the Dark Ages, with the fall of the Western Roman Empire to the barbarian hordes. For the inhabitants of the Eastern Empire that maintained the light of civilization, the West was seen as being too ready to resort to force, instead of relying on diplomacy. One of the great sources that we have of this period known as the Dark Ages, or of the medieval world, is with Gregory of Tours, a bishop in the Catholic Church. He wrote extensively about angry saints, or potentially angry saints. It is important to note that all of the saints of Gregory's time were very touchy. For example, if you seized hay from land belonging to their church, they would strike you dead. And Gregory also wrote extensively about the role of kings, which was simply to terrorize the people, or to make sure that the mere threat of divine vengeance was backed up by a more immediate sort. And for example, Gregory does write of a man found guilty of taking hay from land belonging to Saint Martin. And upon orders of the king, he was immediately put to the sword. Throughout the history of the Middle Ages, there are examples of people who hold God, the saints, or the bishops in contempt, and who pay for it with their lives. Medieval thinking is all about the belief that any defiance is met with a thunderbolt. And all of this is just simply offensive to our modern sensibilities. For example, in one of Gregory's books, the prologue opens with Gregory's plans to describe the holy deeds of the saints and the way in which whole races of people were butchered. That just sounds completely wrong to our modern sensibilities. And in addition to all of this are the many gruesome murders that Gregory describes committed by the hands of the king. In Gregory, we see the medieval belief that yes, the leaders are evil, but that God, at least for a while, has permitted this evil to inflict fear and damage. Thuggish though they are, the kings have been chosen by God to advance God's work. The Lord makes use of instruments of people who are forceful. This medieval mentality actually surfaced during the last election with the justification of Trump by many of his supporters. So we see that for some, we are still undergoing the transition from the medieval world to the modern world. But in this scene here with Capulet, we see the rejection of the medieval caller when Capulet speaks with the modern ethos to Tybalt. He shall be endured.